Hello YouTube. Today I'll tell you about a very interesting find, and as in particular, actually more than one, but also about a general question surrounding a very strange phenomenon. Let me start in Crimea. This is a peninsula in the Black Sea. It keeps changing hands, and today it's controlled by Russia. Well, in July of 2021, they had the peak of their excavation season, and by them I mean archaeologists. News about interesting finds began to appear with regularity, and it pleased those who love antiquity. For example, there was a discovery of the god of silence, also Aphrodite with a mirror, but there was another discovery of interest to all, I'm sure. People buried with deformed skulls were found in the ancient necropolis of Kizaul, according to Oleg Markov, Director of Development of Archaeology Foundation. The scientist said, in the ancient cemetery, the burial of the first centuries of our era has been preserved, and the outlaw diggers or marauders did not reach it. There were 5 skeletons in the grave, on top of the bones of a woman, on whose chest there were remains of a child. All those buried had skull bones deformed during their lifetime, noted Markov. These are the so-called elongated skulls, traditional for the bearers of the Sarmatian culture. According to one of the currently existing hypotheses, this head shape was formed by tight bandaging and was an indicator of the social status of its owner. In addition to the bones, a ceramic saucer, an iron knife, and a copper coin was also found in the burial, which after cleaning would tell the exact date of the burial. Archaeology is a serious science, and everything discovered will be carefully studied. But individual users of the social network have their own hypothesis, and it doesn't exclude traces of extraterrestrial civilizations. So a very interesting comment appeared, and it said, aliens, 5 aliens. It remains to be recalled that the truth is always somewhere nearby, and skulls of this shape have been found on the peninsula before. And maybe one day we would find out if the skulls had to do anything with extraterrestrials. By the way, Crimea is a very esoteric place. I can attest to that. I've done decades of research, and you can find materials about Crimea and UFOs and USOs in my books. And also, I spent some time there many years ago when it was part of the Soviet Union. So listen, 50 kilometers from the city of Kerch, in the ancient necropolis of Kizaul, Yakovenko village, the volunteers of the Archaeology Foundation, they had interesting finds. For example, during the 3 weeks of work of the field camps, the burial of a baby from the 2nd century AD was discovered. Its uniqueness lies in the fact that the skull of the person buried according to the barbaric tradition was severely deformed. The expedition participants immediately dubbed this burial the grave of an alien, according to Oleg Markov. The accompanying material was found next to the skeleton, consisting of a molded vessel, small beads of paste glass, and a copper alloy bracelet worn on the right hand. The burial itself was carried out in a dirt grave without a tile floor. The buried person lay with his head to the east. According to the anthropologist, it was a boy, and at the time of his death he was no more than a year and a half old. This is indicated by a fontanelle or soft spot that was not overgrown on the skull. Accordingly, his head was deformed almost immediately after birth. In the layer where the alien, as they nicknamed him, was discovered, there are burials from the 1st century BC to the 3rd century AD. Monumental stone crypts belong to the same period, which are considered the tombs of the Sarmatian military nobility of the Bosporan kingdom. Just 3 meters from this burial, the volunteers are cleaning one of the crypts, according to Markov. Deformation of skulls is most often found in Sarmatians, especially late ones, and is one of the signs of their identification. It is known that the first finds of artificially deformed skulls were made by the founder of the Bosporan archaeology, Paul Dubreuil, in 1826 in the necropolises of Bosporus of Cimmeria in the Kerch region. According to experts, cranial deformity was most likely carried out to indicate belonging to a group or to demonstrate social status. Of course, for supporters of ancient alien theory or paleocontact, such skulls are irrefutable proof of contact with aliens. By the way, according to some researchers, such changes in the shape of the skull led to a change in the character of a person, for example, to increased aggressiveness. So the Sarmatians, whose skull deformity was very common, were paramilitary people and were distinguished by increased aggression, according to experts. It is quite possible that the boy buried on the Kizaul necropolis was destined to become a warrior, an equestrian cataphract, a defender of the Bosporan state in the future. Okay, but what about other explanations for the strange skulls? Elongated skulls are a very interesting global phenomenon. All over the planet, researchers are discovering traces of these mysterious artifacts, the nature of which allegedly defies any explanation. Many people eagerly call elongated skulls evidence of the existence of forbidden archaeology, and some of them even believe that they are proof that the real history of mankind is actually hidden from the mankind. But who, and most importantly, why is hiding the truth from us? Why are bizarre and unusual deformities of the skull ignored by scientists? And why do they persistently refuse to seek the truth? Why does no one want to know the reason ancient cultures around the world practice the procedure by which they artificially created elongated skulls in humans? And in general, did they come up with this idea on their own? Or was there some external influence on the ancient people? Or maybe thousands of years ago, some advanced human race, unknown to science, inhabited our planet? Look, I'll soon tell you about Arkaim in this video. I think you will find it interesting. So more question, did the ancient people practice skull deformation because they observed a race of advanced creatures that originally had elongated skulls and strange bodies? There are actually lots of questions. It is characteristic that the phenomenon of elongated skulls is not an isolated case. After all, elongated skulls are found in all corners of the earth. Among the most interesting examples of elongated skulls are the so-called skulls of the Paracas culture. They were discovered in the province of Pisco, Peru, almost 100 years ago. Once upon a time, the Inca Empire flourished in these places. It is believed that these skulls are about 3,000 years old, and DNA tests allegedly show that the elongated skulls of the Paracas culture belong to a completely unknown human species to science. Some scientists claim that the DNA extracted from the skulls for research has strange mutations. Such changes are never found in humans. They have also never been observed in primates or other animals. Researchers believe that the elongated skulls belong to completely unknown human species. And this species is very far from Homo sapiens, Neanderthals, or the Denisovans. And it doesn't fit into the generally accepted evolutionary tree. Most likely, these creatures could not even interbreed with humans. There were few of them, and this led to their degeneration. This explains the many skulls of the children found. They were simply not viable. The elongated skulls of the Paracas culture have other strange features. The researchers concluded that the average volume of these skulls is 25% larger than that of the average modern person, and besides, they're 60% heavier than ordinary human skulls. But that's not all. The human skull has two parietal bones, but the elongated skulls of the Paracas culture have only one. That is, it is not a modification of the human skull. So what is it? Aliens? Maybe they visited our planet once a long time ago, and ancient people saw them, and then artificially modified their heads, imitating the deities from heaven. Are the skulls of the Paracas culture just the remains of aliens, a cemetery? What if, for some reason, their ship broke down and they could not fly home? Or did their world die in the fire of some nuclear war? Obviously, in order to find out the whole truth about the phenomenon of elongated skulls, we need to get out from our comfort zone and look at science, history, and the origin of mankind from a completely different point of view, independent of our dogmas and established ideas. Only then we will understand the history and life of ancient cultures that inhabited our planet thousands of years ago. And now, let's go to the mysteries of Arkaim. The ancient Ural fortress Arkaim, located in the Chelyabinsk region, is sometimes called the Russian Stonehenge. I will tell you what I believe is some of the most important information. I don't want to go into every detail, but I think you'll find it interesting. In 1987, Arkaim Valley in the southern Urals was going to be flooded and turned into an artificial lake. But before that would happen, archaeologists were given a year, more or less, to find out about the mysterious circles located in the area. When archaeologists began to work, they found out that these circles were Arkaim settlements. It was a sensation. Arkaim is not only a settlement, but it is also a temple and an astronomical observatory, and I'll get to it. It was round and was 160 meters in diameter. It was surrounded by a ditch that was filled with water. An outside wall was very massive. The height was 5.5 meters and the width was 5 meters. The wall had 4 gates. The largest gate was Southwest Gate. All the buildings were shaped in half rounds and were connected to the outside wall. Each building had exit to the main street in the city. In addition to streets and buildings, scientists have found remnants of a water system, metallurgic furnaces, and mines. Arkaim's excavations did not find jewels, masterpieces of ancient art, unknown writing. They didn't even find an atomic reactor or spaceship. Only shards of broken pottery, bones of domestic and wild animals, rare stone tools, and very rare bronze ones. But even these ordinary things are very few in Arkaim. The collection of artifacts is so poor and featureless that it is not possible to make a museum expedition befitting the occasion. The study of the design plan revealed a complex and precise geometry in it. Arkaim is not just a complex structure, but even a sophisticated one. Meanwhile, its purpose and functions are not at all obvious. Well, Arkaim was built with 4 entrances to the city strictly oriented at cardinal points. It was built according to a previously designed plan with a high level of precision. All circumferences have one center where all radial feeders meet together. The residential area of the fortress boasted advanced amenities considering the time it was built in. The pavement made of thick logs had a sewage system. 2 round one-story houses positioned along the perimeter between the 2 fortified walls comprised separate apartments, 100 or more square meters each. In addition to several rooms, each apartment had a hearth and a well. In the very center of the city fortress was a square where religious rites were performed. The first official sighting of Arkaim actually took place in 1935. Using information derived from military aerial photography, the Soviet geologist Batenina identified a number of these fortresses during the 1960s. A complex of 17 fortresses was discovered in the southern Urals, in the regions of Magnitogorsk, Orenburg, and Troitsk. Look, now decades after the discovery, it is quite clear that the main value of the disturbed ruins was and apparently will remain the construction of the structure. The fire that put an end to the living history of Arkaim is one of the most intriguing mysteries of this monument. There would be nothing special about it if it were one of those natural disasters that are not so rare even today, to destroy entire settlements overnight. The singularity of the Arkaim fire is that apparently it did not come as a surprise to the inhabitants of the settlement. It is likely that they themselves burned it, for only this can explain the fact that there are no usable things in the ancient ashes. Just like I said, fragments or shards. And there is no question of human remains. Everyone left alive. They took everything valuable with them. Why? One of the plausible versions or hypotheses is expressed by Russian professor Ivanov from Chelyabinsk. He says that 3,500 years ago, there was a giant explosion of the Santorini volcano in territory of present-day Greece, which caused an ecological catastrophe. In a significant part of the planet's territory, the weather has been established similar to what is predicted at the onset of a nuclear winter. Apparently, this was accompanied by some natural anomalies, which were perceived by the residents of Arkaim as a sign and forced them to leave the city, committing it to burning. Well, this hypothesis is good, for the lack of the better ones. Nevertheless, the fact remains immutable. Built at once, according to a single plan, the proto-city of Arkaim suddenly ceased to exist, abandoned by all the inhabitants and probably burned by them. But neither fire nor time could destroy the relief of the continent. In Arkaim, the horizon line removed from the monument at a distance of 1.5 kilometers in the west to the 5 in the east. It also remained unchanged. And on the horizon line, Russian archaeologists have discovered at least 38 objects that, according to traditional archaeological classification, are often certified as an anthropogenic object of unclear purpose. And for a specialist in astroarchaeology and archaeogeodesic, it is quite obvious that we're dealing here with visors used by ancient observers of the stars. Anyway, summing up all these facts, we can make an unmistakable conclusion. We have there an ancient near-horizon observatory. Astroarchaeology has accumulated a lot of facts indicating that throughout ancient history, since the Paleolithic, different people of the Earth built near-horizon observatories to observe the sunrises and sunsets of the stars. So why was Arkaim the largest, the most perfect near-horizon observatory? Why was it needed for primitive, semi-savage, as it was commonly believed, people who lived almost 5,000 years ago in the South Ural steppes? Now listen to this. 3 kilometers from the Arkaim Nature Reserve in the Kizilsky district of the Chelyabinsk region, scientists some years ago discovered a unique burial. The discovery was made by an archaeological expedition which included scientists from Chelyabinsk State University, employees of the Arkaim Nature Reserve, and students of the Department of History of the Chelyabinsk State University. The excavations were carried out on the territory of the burial ground discovered in the 1990s, but remained untouched until the year of discovery. The burial ground consists of 15 mounds having an unusual horseshoe shape and presumably dates back to the 2nd to 3rd centuries of our era, so just like in Crimea. That's according to Maria Makurova. She's the head of the Arkaim Reserve Museum. The expedition has unearthed the first of 3 mounds that are planned to be explored. In it, they found a burial in which there is a skeleton with a pronounced deformation of the skull. In the upper part, it has a distinct elongated shape. Most likely, it is the skeleton of a woman. It will be possible to say exactly who is buried in the burial ground, a woman or a man, only after an anthropological examination. Most likely, archaeologists have discovered the grave of a noble woman from the tribe of the late Sarmatians, the nomadic people who inhabited the territories of southern Russia, Ukraine, and Kazakhstan. The pose in which the skeleton was found suggests that before the funeral the body was tightly swaddled in some kind of cloth or shroud, so that the hands were tightly pressed to the trunk and the legs were brought together. The skeleton lies on its back, the head facing north. This method of burial is typical for many nomadic tribes that inhabited the Eurasian steppes, including the late Sarmatians, who roamed the South Ural steppes from the 2nd to 4th century AD. The greatest interest in the find is the artificial deformation of the skull. Why was it necessary to give the nomad's head an elongated shape? What if the woman was one of those descendants of the mysterious people of Arkaim? We do not know what they looked like, those ancient builders of a complex observatory in the enigmatic city. But was she and her people unique? As the archaeological finds of the last 2 centuries have shown, the practice of prolonged mechanical action on the growing head of children in order to deform it was common among many people who developed completely independently of each other. The first artificially deformed skulls were found in Peru at the very beginning of the 19th century, in 1820, done in 1820 in Austria, according to archaeologist Mikhail Pinegov. Further archaeological research has shown that elongated skulls are found almost everywhere. They are found in the graves of ancient Egyptians in North Africa, in the graves of the Aztecs, Incas, and other Indian tribes of Mesoamerica and South America, in the necropolises of Central Asia and Khwarezm, in burials in the territories belonging today to Malta, Iran, Syria, Cyprus, Crete, France, Norway, and many other countries. Relatively recently, they were found in the graves located in the territory of Siberia. Scientists exclude the possibility that the skulls found by archaeologists could have acquired a strange elongated shape due to the peculiarities of caring for babies in ancient times or injuries suffered. Artificial deformities on the head can be intentional and unintentional, according to Russian anthropologist Boris Salzman. For example, if a baby is tightly swaddled and put in a cradle for a long time in one position, then his or her skull will deform in the occipital part. Under the influence of its own gravity, it will become flattened. However, it is extremely difficult to imagine what an unintended effect on the bones of the head should be so that they acquire an even elongated shape. Accordingly, this goal was achieved consciously. Anthropologists have found that special wooden pads and ropes were used to deform the bones of the skull. They tightly pulled the children's heads in the temples. In some burials in South America, even special children's beds were found, in which small children were fixed so that they could not take off all these devices that caused unpleasant sensations. Later, they were replaced with a more gentle technology, strips of fabric. So in the African tribe of Mangbetu, parents still tightly swaddle their children's heads with bandages, after which the bones of the skull acquire an elongated shape. Artificially limiting the growth of the skull, unnatural curvature of the head is still being achieved by some tribes of the Congo, Sudan, and the New Hebrides Islands in the western Pacific Ocean. Now, in Sarmatians, circular deformation of the shape of the head is first found in burials of the early period. The fact that eggheadness, as they called it, was popular on the eastern shore of the Black Sea was reported by the ancient Greek physician Hippocrates in the 5th century BC. He tells about a certain ethnic groups of macrocephalians whose heads stretched up, and it was sign of belonging to the elite. Macrocephals considered those who have longest heads to be the noblest. Their custom is as follows. As soon as a child is born, and while his head is still tender and flexible, they form it and make it grow in length, surrounding it with a bandage and using appropriate means so that its round spherical shape can be changed and increased in length. References to macrocephals are found in the works of Aristotle, Strabo, and Pliny. In the 1st century BC, to 1st century AD, skeletons with upstretched skull are found in 35% of Sarmatian burials. Then this tradition became more popular, and in the 2nd to 4th century AD, this head shape was already found in 88% of the graves. The ubiquity of this custom among the nomadic tribes living in the south of Russia made it one of the most distinctive features of the late Sarmatians. According to a number of Russian researchers, it was the Sarmatian tribes who borrowed this custom from the nomadic tribes of Central Asia and then brought it from the Volga steppes to Europe, retreating to the west under the onslaught of the Huns. So why for centuries have people considered it necessary to change the shape of their children's heads? Well, the first explanation officially is the simplest. They probably considered elongated skulls to be more beautiful. For the same reason, the Japanese tightly bandaged the girls' feet so that they remain tiny, and the Thai Padaung tribe stretched their necks, putting more and more rings on it. In pursuit of the ideal, Hollywood beauties periodically remove the lower ribs and molars. However, such a completely logical explanation raises another question. Why did many people quite independently come to the conclusion that elongated skull is much more beautiful than usual? Asked Boris Saltzman. An abnormally long neck, a small foot, or a thin waist can form naturally and occur even often enough to become a role model. Here everything depends on the standards of beauty in a particular society. But the elongated shape of the skull is an extremely rare anomaly. It is difficult to suggest that in several isolated societies at once, she, for example, was suddenly considered beautiful without any external reasons. Why has no one tried to achieve, say, a flattened or square head shape? Although such anomalies do occur periodically, in order for many members of society to want to have elongated sculpts, such a head shape had to be a characteristic feature of an ideal or a supreme being, especially when you consider that for the sake of such a deformation, you had to make serious sacrifices. The pressure on the bones of the skull contributes to the development of migraines, is fraught with mental and physical anomalies. It was impossible not to notice the harmful consequences of using the practice of deformation for millennia. There had to be good reasons. It is impossible to assume that the fashion for egg-headedness spontaneously or due to a coincidence arose in one of the ancient societies and then spread among other peoples, separated by gigantic distances and oceans. Therefore, here scientists have to go into areas that are more near scientific, so to say. One of the explanations why many ancient peoples, separated by spatial and temporal frames, needed to change the natural shape of the skull is offered by the supporters of the theory of paleocontact or ancient aliens, according to Mikhail Penegov. In their opinion, the alien beings who visited the Earth at various periods of its history had skulls of this elongated shape. The terrestrial people who perceived them as gods sought to become like them by changing their appearance. He also mentions that the author of the book Everything You Know Is a Lie, archaeologist Lloyd, claims that the reconstruction of the Gerasimov skull found near the city of Chihuahua in Mexico gives an exact match with the generalized portrait of an alien creature compiled according to the descriptions of our contemporaries who claim that they communicated with aliens. All contactees describe them as creatures with elongated head shape, about the same as the owner of crystal skulls in the last movie of the Indiana Jones series. All this sounds fantastic, but many times what was perceived by science as complete nonsense yesterday, tomorrow, it became an immutable truth. Some historians believe that the elongated shape of the head marked a special role in the social group, was a distinctive feature of the ruling caste or clergy. However, this raises the question again, why was it believed that this particular shape of the skull emphasized the high status of their owners? Why the elongated skull? A common explanation is that in this way they became similar to the gods or deities that most ancient people, for example the Maya Indians, ancient Egyptians, Semitic tribes of the Middle East, depicted in complex elongated headdresses or with elongated skulls. But why did they imagine the deities from the stars to be like this? There's another serious argument against the theory of head deformity to demonstrate the status. Why then, for example, in Sarmatians, the elongated shape of the skull is found in more than 80% of burials of the late period? There could not have been such a number of priests and rulers, according to Mikhail Penegov. So another common version or hypothesis sounds more convincing, that the elongated shape of the head had an informative function and made it possible to distinguish one's own from others. Members of many societies are characterized by the desire to identify their belonging to them, irreversibly changing their appearances. However, it is much easier to do this with the help of collar or scar tattoos, by changing the shape of ears, nose, or other ethnic self-inflicted injuries. Changing the shape of the skull in children is too difficult and dangerous. Moreover, studies of Sarmatian burials have shown that the deformed skulls found in them in the same way belong to different anthropological types. That is, the special shape of the head could not speak of belonging to a particular tribe, which contradicts the original assumption. Perhaps it testified to belonging to a certain union of tribes. However, the theory of marking with the help of skull deformity belonging to a certain union of tribes again doesn't explain why this practice has become widespread in almost all territories of Earth, according to Penegov. Therefore, he thinks that the question of the causes of artificial deformation of the shape of the head should still be considered open. In his opinion, this is one of the most intriguing questions of historical anthropology. Interestingly, the fashion for an elongated skull has not disappeared without a trace. It left many traces in a variety of cultures, including Russian. Some researchers explain the appearance of the Russian kokoshnik, special headwear, by the attempt of Slavic tribes to imitate the shape of the heads of conquerors, nomads, Sarmatians, according to Russian historian Silantlev. And it is not by chance that the kokoshniks have become a detail of the woman's costume. According to ancient Greek historian Herodotus, women in the Sarmatian tribes had a higher social status than other ancient peoples. They took an active part in public life and sacred rituals, even fought on an equal footing with men. Herodotus explained this by saying that the Sarmatians descended from the marriages of the Scythians and the legendary Amazons. And I urge you, please, see my video about Eurasian Amazons. I think you will be amazed. You'll find facts that I don't think you'll find much anywhere else about Central Asia and Eurasia. You will find it in my channel. Anyway, modern historians see the explanation for the high status of women among the Sarmatians in the traces of matriarchy, or maybe the command of the alien ships that come from the celestial objects was not just confined to males, and maybe females in their society had an equal or a larger role. Very interesting. Well, many researchers suggest that initially the deformation of the skulls was practiced exclusively among Sarmatian women, and the heads of men were quite ordinary in shape, and the kokoshnik, as an accessory of a woman's costume, had preserved a memory of this feature. I could go on and on, but we're dealing with a very interesting phenomenon. and I try to show you as much as I can, but I'm sure we'll have more discoveries in the future and more strange beings found in different graves and burial mounds, caves with elongated skulls. So I will tell you more when I get more information. I thank you for your support, and if you can support my efforts, please find the links in the description to this channel. Please subscribe to my channel, please tell others, please like it, and I hope to bring you more interesting stories soon. Thank you.